Well, today was my first day doing a live discussion on Christianity. I feel like I could have done much better. There was just so much being brought up, and I had a very limited time. Luckily, Drake agreed to have another discussion with me on a specific topic some other time. And I'm going to say that I am looking forward to it. Now, I am going to show the full discussion with no cuts. So here it goes in 3, 2, 1.
We are waiting on him to figure out how to... Howdy, how are you doing today, sir? Uh-oh. Is the devil corrupting your mic? There it is. So how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. So I guess tell me about yourself. What flavor of Christian are you?
Eastern Orthodox.
Sorry?
Eastern Orthodox. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sorry. You're a little quiet.
Yeah, I try to put myself in a quiet area, see if that would help.
I gotcha. So what parts of the Bible do you like to selectively ignore to make being a Christian easier?
Selectively ignore, huh?
Well, yeah.
Nah, I don't.
Sorry?
I don't really ignore any of it.
You don't
I take
ignore...
it as a whole.
So you follow it one-to-one?
What I do is I'll read all the way from how covenant played through each covenant. So we have the first earlier covenant all the way from Adam and Eve all the way to now, where we are now under Jesus Christ.
I didn't hear any of what you said. I'm sorry.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to switch microphones.
All right. Well, we gotta wait on this guy to figure out his microphone situation here. In the meantime, I'll just hang out with you all in the chat. But if you can to the apartment.
All right.
Howdy.
I'm back. All right, can you hear me better?
Yes. So
Oh,
what were you explaining there?
all right. So what I do is I follow each covenant as it goes through each time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So each covenant, I'm trying to find a good way to explain it, but essentially each thing works through each time and what's going on with the current culture at the time.
Each story of the Bible?
Everything all the way from Adam and Eve, all the way to now through Jesus Christ. Yes.
Okay. So the parts of the Bible that talk about caring for slaves and stuff, that you live by that, right?
Can't exactly do that, now can we?
But you agree with it.
If we lived in a culture that still legally permitted slavery, I would absolutely care for those people. I would do what I can to make sure that
You would condone slavery if we had
I
it.
wouldn't condone it. No, I would absolutely not condone it. I would care for the people in every way I could.
But you would so you wouldn't condone it, but you would like facilitate it? Like
Facilitate either.
so then I'm not
By
sure
caring, I would do everything I could. If I could find a way to free them, as our ancestors have done as well, I would do that.
in the Bible
There's a reason why the Bible does not really condone or really facilitate. It don't really condone or really fully disagree with slavery either. What it does is it tries to fight through the different cultural means throughout each time.
that's not true.
And there's a lot of historical issues going on with why slavery was being used at a certain time frame, which is also why by the time you got to western side of things around the 1800s, it became a huge debate and why a lot of the abolitionists were actually Christian leaders trying to go, hey, we're doing a lot of things we're not supposed to be doing. Like, the Bible clearly says, do not go and take other people from other nations. That is a death penalty right there. And so on and so on. The Bible is very clear on it, basically describing that everything we were doing horribly wrong.
I mean, in the Bible, there's several verses where God is clearly he's comfortable with the concept of slavery.
Define comfortable.
Sorry?
Define comfortable. Well, how are you using the
I
word
mean, he
comfortable?
describes it in in Genesis chapter 17 verse 12, he describes that, you must circumcise slaves. Like
Yeah,
Like,
and who else was being circumcised? It wasn't just slaves. It was everyone.
well, yes.
In other words, slaves are being brought into that family. In other words, the slaves were also under the same covenant and had every single spiritual rights as any other person that there does. They were not lesser in the eyes of God.
I guess I'm uncomfortable with the idea of him, like, he's permitting slavery in a
Well,
sense.
it's not that he was permitting it, it's like he was allowing it for a time. He laid out the groundwork for what would be used to, free the slaves. So
So
you got to
the,
think about it. Throughout the time, what is more important? What is more important? The earthly matters is something that's very temporary, something that will be done away with, or the spiritual matters, the things that will lead to eternity.
in the Bible, there is slavery,
I do not disagree.
and then we don't have it now.
Yes.
So is that not in disagreement with the Bible? Is that
No.
not in contrast to it?
No, because we're not ordered to have slaves as Christians. There's nowhere in the Bible that says that we have to have them. But it does regulate what would happen if we live in a culture that does have them.
There's verses that permit beating them.
It doesn't even permit beating them. It tells you, like, hey,
Exodus
do not beat
chapter
them.
21, verse 20.
I knew you were going to go there. All right, let me go ahead and pull up my Bible real quick so I can read the verse in full context. All right, let's see. Which one did you say was?
Exodus chapter 21, verse 20. I'll pull it up on mine
All right.
if I can find it. Oh, it's one of the first ones. How about that?
You said 21. What you say? 21:30?
20.
20. My bad. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, man.
All right. All right. Now, 21:20. It says, "And if someone strikes his male or female slave with the rod, and the slave dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, the slave survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for the slave is his property."
So you're
Now,
so
what can we actually take from that?
So you can beat the slave as so long as you don't kill the slave.
Oh, because if you also read on, there's also another verse that actually explains that if you did that, if they don't die, do you know what happens to the slave? They're freed.
Where do you, could you give me the? Is it right after it?
I don't think it's right after that. Let me. Actually, I'm going to check and do a search on the app
ahead.
I have, see if that actually makes it a little more clear.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not having to dig through it. I don't have every single verse in my head just completely memorized. But you are also to free the slave if they were to. The phrase they use is if they were to lose a tooth or an eye, they were to be freed. That's not to be taken fully literal, but what it's supposed to mean is if they suffer from, bodily injury, they're to be freed.
So, hang on, sorry. So in mine, it's written slightly differently because it gets translated and stuff. But it says,
Yeah, I know how that is. I mean,
if it gets up after a day or two, he is not to be punished since the slave is his property.
Oh no, we're talking about different verses right now. But yeah, we're talking about the way
It's
how I
21.
read what I read.
Yeah.
Because the one I read was the NASB translation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you disagree with that then?
I disagree with anyone beating their slave at all, obviously.
What's in the Bible?
You're gonna find the exact verse I was trying to bring
Gotcha.
up earlier.
An interesting. I'm sorry. I'm reading ahead a little bit here. This is one of the ones I had in my notes. So we can get back to this. I didn't want to cut you off, but earlier you
ahead.
said that you're not permitted to get slaves from other nations.
Yes.
Leviticus chapter 25, verse 44. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also
Yes.
buy some of
Now-
the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans, born in your country, and they will become your property. You can will
Alright, now if
them.
you were to look what I was comparing, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm just reading the rest of it. You
Okay,
can will.
yeah, so if you were to actually look at what I was comparing it with, though, I was actually comparing it to the American slave trade that was going on in the 1800s. In which case, a lot of it was also involving the unwillful taking of a lot of men that become slaves.
Yes.
That is very clearly outlined as a huge no-no for Christianity, really, at that time, the Mosaic covenant.
So does that imply that there's a specific incorporation of slavery we could have in the 21st century that's consistent with
In the
Christian
21st
values?
century, I cannot find a way that would actually live up to the standards of Christ,
So the
where we
standards.
are commanded to love, where we are commanded to love one another as our neighbor,
So the
where
standards.
there's no
Sorry.
slave or where there's no slave, no Greek, no Jew, we're all one under God.
So
So I can't really see any way in the 21st century for us to actually get in good conscience actually own slaves anymore.
okay. So
Oh, by the way, I did find that verse I was mentioning earlier.
what is it?
All right, Exodus 21:26. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of the eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go because of his tooth.
Okay. But it also
So in other
says.
words,
Sorry.
what happens if you were to inflict bodily damage? You are to let the slave be free. There's also another passage as well that if a slave were to run away from an abusive master, whoever is to find the slave shall not return him. Which again, since I was comparing that to the American slave trade, also is something that the Americans were not following at the time as well. As that was going on, in fact, that was actually one of the big things that the southern states were also trying to throw a fit about, was saying, hey, return the slaves that came to us. You know, they were
So
wanting the slaves to come back.
so you're saying that I'm moving ahead a little bit. So you're saying that the ideals of Christ that are outlined and written in the Bible, they can change with respect to how humans, I guess, like human society evolves, right? Am I understanding correctly?
I mean, in a sense, there's a little bit of the way how culture, if it changes, it's going to also have to change in response to how Scripture is written.
So if we so it's in then I guess I don't understand why you should follow the Bible if there's aspects and things written inside of it
Because what we
that
need
are
to study is the moral. We need to study the moral aspects of things. That's what we're studying. We're looking at what Christ wants for us and how we can live for Christ.
so you're not meant to interpret it literally?
Not everything. There's some things that are. The Bible is full of a lot of different figures of speech. We have a lot of metaphor, symbolism. We have a lot. We have a whole entire book that is completely poetic in nature and reads like a play.
So
You got to know how to read it and how to interpret it and how to apply it to our life.
I mean, to me that sounds like you're just kind of distorting the parts that are easy to disprove to mean that. Sorry?
No. If a lot of the issues is when there's someone that wants to disprove something, they're going to already try to take a passage, for the most part, this is what I've seen on average. They'll look at a passage that, for the most part, it tends to be already debated amongst Christians already on how literal or how figurative we should take it. So then the person that will try to make a point against it, we're like, look, we're still debating this. Like, we still have people that want to take it more literal, others will take it more figurative.
I see.
For example, the most common one people always go to tends to be most like the beginning passages throughout Genesis. It's always split amongst no matter which denomination you go, unless you're going to like the hyper fundamentalist. For the most part, a lot of Genesis is still debated.
Do you
We
believe
still have people that will take. We have people that will take things more figurative. Well, some they'll take it more literal. For me, I take it as, guess more similar to like William Lane Craig, how he does it, but probably not quite as far. Where there's a lot of historic aspects to it, but it's wrapped around a lot of figurative language as well. So it kind of takes historic events and as aspects of mythology to explain the relationship between man and God in a way that's easy to digest to the ancient communities.
Do you believe in evolution?
I do.
Okay. So in the Bible, we're described as being created in the image of God, right?
Yes.
So if our image changes and evolves, then how are we always created?
Disagree.
Sorry?
This is probably where we disagree on what the Bible means by image. By image, the way how it's really used, especially the way how it's actually written down, it tends to really talk about. Okay, so the best way to really look at it is, okay, so God, he's always been described as being the unseen. So obviously we cannot look at it as being
Well, God
It
appears
actual physical
before
image.
people many times in the Bible. He's not like
Yes, but that's where that gets into a Trinitarian topic at that point. But for the most part, that's what I'm saying is it's a lot more complex when we start talking about God in that kind of way. But what's going on though is we're not looking at it as we're being physical. We're not like the physical embodiment of what he looks like. Otherwise, it reaches a lot of ridiculous conclusions, and no one actually ever interpreted it that way. We're spiritually the image of God. Spiritually speaking, we are made in His image.
Do you understand how that could be seen as avoiding like the confliction though?
I can understand how you can interpret it that way, but at the same time, we're also having to read also what church fathers have written, Jewish interpretations, and you're not going to find any one of them to really say that, yeah, we're the physical embodiment of what God looks like.
Have you read the Life book?
Life book?
Yeah. Have you heard of it?
I've not heard of it.
Okay. I mean, it's essentially it's like a summarized version of the Bible that some guy editorialized, where he describes. I mean, this isn't really that relevant if you haven't read it. It's very popular among Christians, but it's a summarized version of the Bible that's annotated by different personalities and characteristics. Different, like, people with different personalities and characteristics, and it describes that we are literally created in the image of God. He says it in reference to physical appearance. We don't know what God looks like, but we know that we were created in His image. So I mean, like, I don't know if you use the word image, I don't know how that would mean something that's like metaphorical if you're using the term image.
Say it in a metaphorical way. I'm saying more in a spiritual way. So we're literally made in it's like the spiritual image of God. So whatever God is able to represent is what we should be representing.
Can God make anything happen?
As long as it's still fit within His characteristics, yes. He has certain divine attributes and things that He does not willfully go against. So, like, for example, God, He cannot lie. God is unchanging. So He cannot go against the things that He's already said.
In the Bible, Jesus appears before Paul, right?
Yes.
He appears physically in contradiction to Paul's doubts to prove his existence.
I wouldn't say necessarily to prove His existence, but I would say it would also be bringing along part of the whole entire plan of what's all going on. Bring Him in as an apostle. Helps the church. It really helps church grow tremendously.
So, I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense to me as to why Jesus can appear before Paul, and Paul benefited from a personal meeting with the resurrected Christ because of the visit. He was able to see for himself the truth of the resurrection, and he could ask Jesus questions. So why can't he appear to everyone else and prove himself?
Which reminds me of a quote that Richard Dawkins was saying some time ago, where if Jesus were to appear to him now, he would still just assume maybe he's in some kind of simulation, or maybe Jesus is actually an alien. It would not prove to him that Jesus is God. For some people, it wouldn't really have that same effect towards. Paul, he was already, he was a Pharisaical man. He was already entrenched in Jewish traditions. And there's a lot when it came to everything that Jesus was saying, that the one vindication that could show that Jesus was who He said He was, it'd be through the resurrection.
Well, Paul wasn't the
That's
only.
all Paul would need.
Well, Paul wasn't the only person that he appeared in front before. He appears before. We were told in the Bible that he appears before hundreds of people.
Yes.
It's okay for him to appear before people.
Yes.
But
not everyone's going to have the same response.
Why has nobody seen him then?
I mean, that you would actually have to that's a bit more of a different kind of debate on that one. But for the most part, I mean, if you actually read a lot of reports, you see a lot of people even today converting in massive numbers because they still see Jesus. In fact, if I remember correctly, it was sometime, like a good few months ago or so?
Oh,
there was
the
actually
second
massive
coming was a few
numbers
months
of-
ago.
No.
Damn.
Yeah, we don't worry, you haven't missed it just yet, buddy. But about a few months ago, though, there was actually a mass amount of numbers, hundreds of Muslims all converting at once because they were all having dreams of Jesus, and it was just something that was only been described as a miracle the way it happened.
So it's okay for
Then he
Jesus.
just brought,
So it's okay for Jesus to appear to people, but he doesn't because no one would be convinced if he appears.
I mean, it just kind of it's more like when you want to do something towards someone else to try to get a certain result, if that result isn't going to happen. Like if I were to, like if someone just said that they don't believe in anything in reality, if they believe that all reality exists within their mind, what can you actually do to really disprove them wrong? Showing something happening ain't gonna do anything to them.
I mean, I'm not sure I
Yeah,
see. I'm not sure I see why that's relevant per se, but like, if it's okay for him to appear to people, like Jesus can do anything. He says, I believe I might be getting the one wrong. Matthew 17:20, that nothing is impossible. You know, should you pray to him, he should be able to appear like right now to me, but he doesn't.
good. But what would happen if you did? Would you actually believe that's him?
He won't. I mean, if he did, but he won't appear for me.
Are you sure you would?
Sorry.
If he were to appear to you right now, would you not still have doubts? Would you still
I
think
mean, it's like,
this man could be a hallucination? This man could instead, as Richard Dawkins said, could be an alien.
well, you're asking a difficult question because he's never appeared to anyone. So it's like it's
Well,
not.
again, that's where I disagree with you. I believe he has appeared to others. Paul being obviously one of the earlier ones, disciples, and then if we go to modern times, there's hundreds of Muslims that will say he appeared to them. That's just as recent as just months ago in mass,
So why haven't we seen
leading to their
anything?
mass conversion.
So
But
if
that's because
he,
they were more susceptible. Like they were already believing in God. They still believed that the only thing that kept them from believing Jesus as God was pretty much what they already believed. But the resurrection, if they were able to come to believe that, hey, the resurrection happened,
so they believed in
automatically.
him, and then said that he appeared, and then said that
So
that
what
he
they
appeared
believed, they
before.
believed in God, but they didn't believe that Jesus was God. Because for those people that I'm specifically talking about, they believe that he was never killed, that he was taken straight to heaven. So if all of a sudden they had Jesus come to him, hey, I did die, then I was resurrected. That disproved their whole entire religion at that exact moment to them.
I mean, it seems a little convenient to me, I guess.
I mean, it probably didn't seem too convenient for those people where they were under a death sentence at that point.
Well, I mean,
Mass
it's
apostasy. It was mass apostasy.
I mean, it's in contrast to what I believe. So then why,
Yeah,
why
that's what I'm
can't
saying.
he
It's like
appear?
because for that same reason I'm saying, like it wouldn't. There's a good chance it really wouldn't really persuade you as much as you're probably saying it is. I don't know
Well,
your heart. I can't say if it will or not, but for the most part, from what I've seen with a lot of people, is so full of doubt that even seeing things, you can see something, and it still wouldn't do anything. You can still come up with many reasons. I mean, I was the same way with that, where I can come up with a whole ton of explanations just to avoid the truth of what I didn't want to see.
I mean it's you're making presumptions here, like you're speculating.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm already telling you. I'm openly admitting that yes, I'm presuming, or I am assuming a lot of things right now. I am making a lot of assumptions because, like I said, I do not know your heart. I do not know enough about you in order to really say what it really is. I can only estimate based off of what I've seen with others. That's really it.
Well, I mean, I guess we all have to do that in some ways, but
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense to me that he apparently is appearing to people in the current age, but we're not seeing like proof of this, like
what kind of
anything
proof would
to.
you need? What
Sorry.
kind of proof do you think could be left?
I mean, if he can do anything, he should be able to physically appear before us, like beyond a video, beyond anything. Like if he can do anything, he should be able to do that. If he can do anything, he should be able to prove his existence.
I feel he has, but not everyone's going to accept it. We have a lot of people that also will still reject basic truth. We still have people out there saying, we have people that have evidence flat out showing that, hey, the earth is not flat. But we still have people still out there going, hey, we're denying that evidence. So if Jesus were to present himself, we would even if we had that solid evidence right now, even if you had it in your hands, there's no guarantee that there's going to be there's no guarantee that there's going to be massive people going, hey, we have this evidence, we need to believe, because there are certain people that they're still going to go with what they feel. When it comes down to it, the way how you feel about things is still going to be a major component. I've seen people actually have great evidence on what they want to really show, and they'll still flat out deny what the evidence leads to.
The way that Jesus proved himself to exist to Paul was that he appeared before him.
I mean, he knew Jesus existed. I mean, he obviously knew Jesus existed.
Well, the way that he proved that he resurrected.
Had nothing to do with knowing if he existed. He needed to know if Jesus was God. And when Jesus appears to him, it's like, okay, well, this dead man's standing right in front of me. Obviously, he's not quite as dead as I thought. And that was the proof he needed at that point. I mean, he already had all the evidence he needed, all the different claims, everything all around him. Once he got to see the risen Jesus in front of him, that was the last thing he did. Go, yep, that's it. All right. And even then, it still wasn't exactly like a very clear transition either. I mean, he still had a little bit of a journey to go before he became the Apostle Paul.
I mean, it sounds like this is all being obfuscated in ambiguity now.
I wouldn't say so.
Well, if he can, in 1820 from Matthew, he says that he's in our midst, right?
Yeah.
He's always around and always able to appear at any moment, but he doesn't.
All right. Trying to figure out, again, with the way how we've had this conversation so far, trying to see why that really would mean as much as what you're really trying to make it out to be.
Because it's in the Bible.
He can appear to us. Yes, I'm saying, if he can appear to us, that still don't always mean as much to someone like you. Don't believe. But to someone who already believes in God, believes in all these different rules and traditions, someone that even believes that he did actually exist. And I'm not sure if you're a mythicist or not, but
Well, what you're essentially saying is that to believe in God, you have to believe in God.
No, but if you're going to believe in Jesus being God, there's going to be some other steps you would really need to take in order to really accept it as easily. There's a reason why you see a lot of apologists really trying to establish. That's the reason why you see a lot of apologists trying to establish a God to start with. Otherwise, it don't matter what you really present to them when it comes to Jesus and his resurrection. That's why you see people really trying to spend hours and hours just discussing this is try to explain why they believe God exists. All the way from all these different arguments of Kalam, all the way to right now, but just a lot of different arguments. Now, in my opinion, I do think it'd be better just to go ahead and go all the way to Jesus, but I do find that it does still lead to a lot of kind of having to explain a few more things while doing it, but I think it's a much quicker route. But for the most part, though, I mean, a lot of times it's a lot easier for someone who already believes in God to believe that Jesus is that God when you see what he's been able to do. But now, for someone that don't believe in any of the Scripture, one of the big things you have to do first is you have to really show the reliability of Scripture. Otherwise, they could just hand wave it away and just go, well, how do I know if that's true?
I think that's a valid question. How do you know?
I do too. I do too. I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. You can't just lean straight into it right away. Go, hey, here's Jesus, or this is what we can actually look at. Show that Jesus existed. You have to do a lot more legwork in order to really show Jesus being God to someone who has no belief in any of the Scriptures whatsoever.
Jesus can't do anything.
I believe so too.
So then, why can't he?
What part are you asking? Why can't he? What?
Why can't he persuade? Why can't he persuade me if he exists?
I mean, I believe he can. I believe there's the reason why you're probably even asking all these questions.
Well, no.
And I believe it's going to weigh in on your heart. But
No.
trust me, I was in a very similar situation. I would get in arguments all the time with Christians, and
So you used to be an atheist.
I wasn't an atheist, but
Oh,
I
so
yeah, I had different religious views, and I was like even leaning more towards Islam for a while.
oh,
That
you know, I'm
had a
getting
more had a more pagan viewpoint, but it was also kind of wrapped around a lot of Greek ideas, and I had Muslims starting to talk to me, and I was getting closer towards that ideology.
So what?
But
What? I guess what persuaded you?
well, once I actually started, when I actually did a deep dive on scriptural history, once I actually got rid of all the questions that were lingering in my head, so really going through the gospel reliability was a big thing.
I mean,
Sorry.
the reason why I believe things is because there's evidence for them, because there's supporting arguments. So, like,
I believe there's a lot
what
of
evidence
supporting
was
evidence for
presented
this.
to you to make you believe in God, or maybe not believe in God, but to persuade you to this
Yeah,
specific ideology?
given this specific ideology, it was all the historical data.
Oh, like what?
So the fact that every single archaeological study that's ever been done involving scriptures, no matter what it is, it either confirms it or at best it doesn't say anything about it. You don't have anything negatively, against it. You don't have any evidence against the archaeological aspect. You don't have any evidence against the Bible. You don't have anything against Christianity.
Well, that's
Only towards
proving a
the positive.
negative.
No,
You don't.
like I
There's
said,
no
I'll take,
evidence that's
if you
in
want to if you
contradiction for
want
the
to dis,
Bible.
no, what I'm trying to say is if you want to be able to disprove anything regarding the Bible, for example, let's just say if you want to try to say that, hey, oh, actually, there was actually a real good one where there was a more recent discovery. Well, I say recent. It's kind of I say recent in kind of the way how historians would do at this point. But whenever they looked at the 5 tower porticos, whenever they looked at that, that was something that there was no discovery for, and it was actually used heavily to go, hey, we have no evidence that this even existed. If they were able to find anything to say that this is just, even if this is like some folklore, that would have been pretty good evidence against the Bible. Or if you were to find something that even disproves like way how the temple taxes were done, if you were to find how, if you were to look at what something would have been according to the temple tax, and if it didn't line up, that would disprove. So you can definitely prove negatives if you were actually really look at what they say, and if they don't line up, you can disprove certain aspects. But that's just it, is everything lines up.
In the Bible, it
So
says
that's
that
really
God
true.
created the universe.
I believe he did.
But like according like, see, the problem with proving a negative is that if you aren't proving, I'm not sure I quite understand. I'm not sure I quite understand what you're even positing.
So
You're saying
in order
that
to prove a negative,
sorry?
I'll put this real simple. Let's just say if if there was me and my friend right here in the same room, and I would say I have a shirt on. Well, the negative would be obviously that I don't have a shirt. Now, can you prove if I have a shirt or not? Yes, you can present me. You show, hey, you got a shirt right here. Pull on the shirt. Look. If you were to say that I don't have a shirt, well, if you didn't have a shirt, you'd have your bare flesh shown. Look at that. You have something over it. You can find evidence to say that this isn't supported, that the claim is not supported, or if it is supported. You can find evidence to go in either or direction.
It's I just
It's all about finding.
don't
It's all about
agree.
finding evidence towards the positive or negative. There's positive evidence. There's negative evidence.
Okay.
You can find evidence to show that something is more likely, or you can find evidence to suggest that, hey, all the evidence here is pointing towards a different direction. So, for example, like for a while, in the beginning of physics, everyone was starting to really root forward the idea of an eternal universe. And that's why when the Big Bang was posited, they were like, oh, look at this religious guy here. And they were trying to find evidence to point against it, point towards an eternal universe. But then eventually they started finding more evidence to go, hey, it looks like everything was kind of going towards a singular beginning. Now, there's other theories that still being posited after that, but either way, they're still trying. It's all about finding the positive and negative evidence.
Okay.
I'm hoping that makes sense. I'm sorry. I'm also just took some medicine to help with my breathing and kind of a little jumpy
I
right
got you, buddy. It's okay.
now.
It's just it doesn't. It seems to me that you're making these broad sort of oh, well, like these parts are allegorical and these parts are literal of the Bible, or these parts are contextual to the modern
Or it
day.
probably also helps if you study cultural history as well. Study the way how study idiomatic phrases, study the way things were spoken, and the way how they did teach. So hyperbolic language was used a lot by early rabbis. Hyperbolic language is used a lot to ancient Jewish customs. So, like, if you were to look at trying to find the right ones, but so whenever you had like Jesus telling the disciples like you should hate your mother and father. It's not saying you should actually hate them. It was hyperbolic language to explain, hey, you should put God first. If you're not willing to drop them for God, you're not doing that. It's hyperbolic language. It's not because that would also go clearly against commandments saying they should honor your mother and father, which is something that they understood. Otherwise, they would raise quite a fuss on that. And trust me, they raised a fuss with a lot of things he said. So you got to also understand when certain things are said, you can understand it to be hyperbolic. You can understand it to be metaphorical. You can understand it to be more of a spiritual. You can understand it to be a parable. There's a lot of ways that they spoke. You can't ever look at things just on surface level and go, this is what it means. You got to actually look at what it means. You got to actually study why are they saying it? Is there a purpose to why they're saying it?
So you're
and
saying,
if so, what is that?
So you're saying that there's archaeological evidence for what? The crucifixion of Jesus, or like?
Well, we definitely have evidence though that we do actually have people that were crucified and then buried in tombs, which is something that really
So that settles that then.
No, I mean actually, believe it or not, that's actually a lot bigger point than you think, and it created a huge stir in the historic community because for a while it was spouted that if you're crucified, you were not ever be placed in a tomb. And that was a huge point because they said that, because according to all records at the time that we had, was if you were crucified because of being a traitor and a lot of other things, and you were considered cursed.
So
and as such, you weren't supposed to be thrown in a tomb. But that changed when we actually found the bone box for a man named Yohanan. He was crucified, and we actually still found a piece of the nail and cross still in his ankle bones.
So who was saying that you don't throw people that are crucified into tombs?
Don't have specific names right now, but it was a very
generally who was.
Generally, it was spoken around throughout the Hellenistic Jewish regions, and that was because that was still a common tradition where a lot of times you were treated as a criminal. You were thrown into paupers' graves and fed to wild animals and stuff like that, which is actually still popularly used by a lot of atheists today as a talking point, despite the evidence going, hey, I mean, some were thrown in tombs. And then if there was a special, case where someone was like, hey, can I really just grab this guy and put him in a tomb? It could happen, especially if that person was someone of influence. But for a while, they was still saying that wasn't a thing for a while for people to say. Because all the evidence pointed that if we had someone that died on a cross, they weren't ever buried in a tomb. They were treated as criminals. It was also a very common Roman tradition to do that, where they keep the body up on, display for when to rot and then be fed to animals. So it's common for the Romans, and according to the Jews, that they would have been considered to be unclean. They would have been considered to be cursed and shouldn't be put in a tomb with others. It was actually what made the tomb that Jesus placed in even more special, because it was a brand new tomb from Joseph of Arimathea. So whenever he was placed in that tomb, no one else was in there for his curse to be affecting anyone.
Okay.
So therefore, you could place Jesus in an empty tomb and it'd been fine. So when you look at what everything the Bible says, you look at what the Jewish traditions say, what the Roman traditions say, and then when you find that we still have crucified bodies in bone boxes, it shows that it is actually very likely that Jesus could have been placed in a tomb. That's why it was such a huge deal when it was found.
So the evidence that you have is that some people were crucified and then put in tombs?
No,
or the
that's not
evidence
the
that
only.
was
I mean,
found.
there's still more evidence you can really go with, but a lot of it really does also go with a lot of more church traditional claims and all that that you have to then study and how that actually affects. Then you also got to look at other claims that were made by the, like the enemies of the early Christians. So you got to look at the ancient Roman claims, ancient Jewish claims, what they had to say.
Okay.
So a lot of them did say, and a lot of,
Go ahead.
but I mean, there's also evidence to suggest, because there was also there was a monument that was trying to talk. Sorry, my mind's now going like 1,000 miles an hour. But there was actually a law that was placed around, shortly after the resurrection happened. There was a
Okay.
law that's placed talking about, hey, it was specifically towards the Jewish people around the Nazareth region. So, hey, do not take bodies from a tomb for nefarious purposes. Well, that's odd. Why would it happen at this point in time? Well, it's because the Christians were saying, hey, our guy is, resurrected. He's God. And around this time, it was a huge, big deal because at this time, Christians were being blamed for a lot of things, like fires and everything else under Nero. Like, there was a lot of things going on, and they were blaming the Christians. They believed that the resurrection, huge thing for this. So they're like, hey, no more doing this. You can't take dead bodies anymore. Which also then coincided, again, with Scripture saying that the Romans were going around saying that the apostles took the body. So we have evidence to suggest that, yeah, the Romans did believe that the tomb was empty and the body was taken.
I'll have to look into what you're talking about because we are running out of time for today.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, there's definitely some interesting coincidental data.
I mean, coincidental, yes, but
It's quite a coincidence.
yeah. What's your name, by the way?
My name is Douglas.
All right, Douglas.
I go by the worst apologist.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, I like to go by the worst apologist just as fun.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in talking to you more about this on another show, but I do have to wrap it up here because this is on TV. It has to be an hour, so I'll talk to you.
All right. Sounds great.
All right, I'll see you.
See you later.
Okay, so I'm not. I'm sorry that I'm saying this while he's disconnected, but it's like I'm not sure I understand where he was even going with any of that. It's like he's saying that, oh, we have physical archaeological evidence for I'm pretty sure he said explicitly we have physical archaeological evidence for the crucifixion of Christ. But like the evidence, quote unquote, is just that we found bodies in tombs. Like whatever. Like it's not even close to like the only reason why people would say that God's not real, because, oh my God, I guess people were actually crucified at one point in time. It didn't make any sense. I'll have to. It's like I wasn't anticipating such bizarre connections. He definitely was more unique in that. So it's not something I was prepared to talk about. So we'll have to talk about this again another time on another show. But yeah, that's basically the show. I appreciate you guys for watching.